In the suburbs of Boston, where autumn leaves shimmered golden in the light, Eleanor Hartfield carefully sorted medications while checking prescriptions at Maple Community Pharmacy. Eleanor had abandoned a glamorous career at her parents' pharmaceutical company, Hartfield Pharmaceuticals, choosing instead to work at this community-based pharmacy. "Eleanor, how's the preparation for Mr. Johnson's medication coming along?" her colleague Betty asked. Eleanor smiled as she attached a label to the last bottle. "Just finished. How's his blood pressure? Any better than last month?" "Yes, it's stabilizing. Looks like he's following that diet plan you recommended." Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. Unlike corporate research and development, here she could see the face of each patient. That difference meant everything to her. On her way to the parking lot after work, her mobile phone rang. The screen displayed "Mother." "Hello, Mom. Eli, you haven't forgotten about the dinner party this weekend, have you?" Martha's voice carried its usual hint of anxiety. "The executives are looking forward to it. Especially Chairman Jenkins, who says he's looking forward to seeing Eleanor." Eleanor sighed quietly. Her parents, especially her mother Martha, hadn't given up on the idea of their daughter taking over the family business. "Yes, I remember. I'll bring Marcus too." "Wonderful. His business talk is always stimulating. He was truly an excellent choice for your husband." Eleanor smiled. She had met investment analyst Marcus Shepard 2 years ago at a charity event. Captivated by his refined manner and intellectual conversation, she had married Marcus last year. Her parents, especially her mother Martha, highly valued Marcus's business sense. "So, Sunday at 6. Don't be late." After hanging up, Eleanor got into her car and drove toward the quiet suburban neighborhood. About 15 minutes later, she arrived at a white 2-story house. Bright red canna lilies swayed in the breeze by the entrance, beautifully illuminated in the evening light. "I'm home," she called out, and Marcus's voice answered from the living room. "Welcome back. You've come home at just the right time." Entering the living room, she saw Marcus rising from the sofa, approaching her with a wine glass in hand. Marcus was a man who wore well-tailored suits that complemented his slim figure, always maintaining a confident smile. "Do you remember what special day it is?" Marcus asked, and Eleanor paused to think. "Our wedding anniversary," she exclaimed with a surprised expression. "I'm sorry, my mind was so full of work." Marcus gently interrupted her with a kind smile. "Don't worry. I thought you might forget, so I prepared something special." He pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket. "Open it." Inside the box was a gleaming gold ring. A beautiful deep blue gemstone was set in the center, surrounded by diamonds. "Marcus, this is lovely." Eleanor gasped. "I had it specially designed for you. This blue stone is extremely rare, and I chose it to match the color of your eyes." Marcus took her left hand and carefully slipped the ring onto her finger. "I hope you'll wear it every day as a symbol of our bond." "Of course. I'll treasure it," Eleanor replied, gazing at the ring. "I promise to wear it always." That night, they enjoyed a special dinner at home. They toasted with champagne Marcus had prepared and reminisced about their year together. Eleanor felt she was living a happy married life. Marcus was a husband who always cared for and understood her. However, this happiness wouldn't last long. A few weeks after she began wearing the new ring, Eleanor started suffering from unexplained health problems. At first, it was just mild dizziness and nausea, but gradually persistent fatigue became normal, and the skin on her left hand began to develop an unnatural redness. "You haven't been looking well lately," Betty remarked with concern one morning at the pharmacy. "Maybe you should take some medication." "I've already tried, but nothing seems to help," Eleanor answered with a tired expression. "Perhaps it's just the change of seasons." Upon returning home, Eleanor collapsed onto the sofa. Marcus appeared from the kitchen and frowned at her complexion. Feeling unwell again? Yes, a little. But I'm fine. Marcus shrugged. It's probably work stress. Why don't you take some time off? Eleanor nodded while unconsciously twisting the ring on her finger. The base of that finger was unusually red and slightly swollen. But this was a precious gift from Marcus. She said nothing and went to sleep that night still wearing the ring. As autumn deepened, Eleanor's condition worsened daily. She would wake with dizziness, sometimes struggling just to walk to the bathroom. Nausea would strike at lunchtime, and her appetite decreased. Most concerning was the change in the skin of her left hand where she wore her wedding ring. The redness had spread from the base of her finger to her wrist, sometimes accompanied by a dull pain. Her work at Maple Community Pharmacy began to suffer. She nearly made medication errors, with Betty pointing them out more frequently. Eleanor, are you really okay? Betty asked worriedly one afternoon as they were cleaning up after closing. You've been clearly unwell these past few weeks. Eleanor smiled wearily. Thank you, Betty. But I'm fine. Have you started anything new? New food or cosmetics? Betty was 55, with 30 years of experience as a pharmacist. Her questions always reflected her keen observational skills. Eleanor thought for a moment. Nothing new really. She began, then her eyes fell on the ring on her left hand. Except for this new ring Marcus gave me for our anniversary. That's a beautiful ring. Betty moved closer and took Eleanor's left hand. But the skin around here is quite red. It might be an allergic reaction. Maybe, Eleanor replied, looking at her own hand. But Marcus had it specially made for me. I understand how you feel, but health comes first. Why don't you try taking it off for a while? Eleanor hesitated but answered, I'll think about it. The next day, Eleanor was organizing medications on the shelves when she was suddenly struck by severe dizziness. The floor seemed to tilt, and the ceiling appeared to be spinning. She tried to grab the shelf for support, but her strength failed, and she collapsed to the floor. Eleanor. Betty's voice came from somewhere distant. Someone call an ambulance. As her consciousness faded, Eleanor whispered, Marcus. After that, she only had fragmentary memories, the ambulance siren, the hospital ceiling, and the faces of doctors and nurses flowing through her consciousness like scenes from a movie. When she fully regained consciousness, Eleanor found herself lying in a hospital bed. Judging from the light coming through the window, it was already morning the next day. Betty and her parents were in the room. Thank goodness, Martha Hartfield took her daughter's hand. You've regained consciousness. What happened? Eleanor asked with dry lips. You collapsed at the pharmacy, her father George answered. In his mid-60s, George was respected in the pharmaceutical industry as the founder of Hartfield Pharmaceuticals, but now he wore the face of a worried father. The doctors are running tests. Just then, a middle-aged female doctor in a white coat entered the room. You're awake, Miss Hartfield. How are you feeling? Just a little dizzy. What caused this? The doctor shook her head while looking at her chart. We can't say anything definitive yet. Blood tests show inflammation and unexplained blood abnormalities. We need more detailed tests. Eleanor looked at her left hand. She was still wearing the ring. The redness had spread further, now reaching her wrist. Mom, where's Marcus? Eleanor asked. Martha frowned slightly. I called him. But he said he couldn't get away from an important meeting with clients. I see. Eleanor murmured softly. She understood that Marcus was busy with work, but still, a small feeling of disappointment spread in her heart. After 3 days in the hospital, the doctors discharged Eleanor without a clear diagnosis. You may need more specialized tests, the doctor said. I recommend consulting with dermatology or hematology specialists. We can run tests at our laboratory, Martha suggested in the car on the way home. We have the latest equipment and, more importantly, researchers we can trust. Eleanor answered while gazing out the window. Thank you, Mom. But I'd like to see a dermatologist first. I'm particularly concerned about the condition of my hand. That ring, Martha stared at her daughter's left hand. Didn't you start feeling unwell after you began wearing that ring? Eleanor looked at her mother in surprise. Why do you think that? Mother's intuition. Besides, the design of that ring is a bit unusual. Where did Marcus say he bought it? He said he had it specially made, Eleanor answered, but strangely, she couldn't remember hearing any details about it from Marcus. That evening, when Eleanor told Marcus she wanted to make an appointment with a dermatologist, he showed an unusual reaction. He looked up from his newspaper, visibly disturbed, and asked, "A dermatologist? What for?" "I want to have the condition of my hand checked. It seems to be getting worse by the day." Marcus folded his newspaper and sat beside Eleanor. "There's no need for that. You'll get better with rest. Just stress, as I said." But the doctors couldn't determine the cause, and... "Don't you trust me?" Marcus's voice had an unusual sternness. "Going to a dermatologist would be a waste of time. You should rest more instead." Eleanor was confused by her husband's reaction. Marcus had always been concerned about her health. Why would he be so opposed to her seeing a dermatologist? "You're taking good care of the ring, aren't you?" Marcus suddenly changed the subject. "I don't want you to take it off. It's a symbol of our love." "Of course," Eleanor replied, but there was no confidence in her words. Her eyes were drawn again to her left hand. The blue gemstone ring gleaming alongside her engagement ring. Beautiful, but an ominous feeling was creeping into her heart. After Marcus went upstairs to the bedroom, Eleanor sat alone on the living room sofa. Staring at her mobile phone, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would see Dr. Finch, a dermatology specialist. She wouldn't tell Marcus. "Something's not right," she whispered quietly. "This ring, my symptoms, and Marcus's behavior." Looking at the ring, Eleanor realized for the first time that her mind was dominated by anxiety and fear. As morning mist enveloped the Boston suburbs, Eleanor parked her car in the medical center's parking lot. The clock showed 9:15 a.m. Her appointment was at 9:30. She had told Marcus she was going shopping and left the house. It was the first time she had lied to her husband, and she felt a small pain in her chest, but remembering his unusual reaction, she was confident this decision was right. Entering the building and taking the elevator to the third floor, she saw the sign for Finch Dermatology Clinic. At the reception desk, a white-haired woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning. I'm Eleanor Hartfield. I have an appointment at 9:30. "Welcome, Miss Hartfield. Please wait a moment," the receptionist handed her a questionnaire. Eleanor sat in a corner of the waiting room and began filling out the form. Current symptoms, onset time, medications being taken, allergy history. At the "when symptoms first appeared" section, she paused. Then wrote, "Shortly after receiving a new wedding ring for our first anniversary." After a while, a nurse called her name and led her to an examination room. "Dr. Finch will be with you shortly," she said before leaving. The walls were decorated with posters illustrating skin conditions and framed medical licenses. She noticed the words Howard Finch, MD, dermatology specialist, radiology major. The door opened, and a man entered. His silver-rimmed glasses and well-groomed white hair conveyed intelligence and trustworthiness. "I'm Howard Finch," he said in a calm voice, shaking Eleanor's hand. "Please have a seat." Dr. Finch reviewed Eleanor's questionnaire, occasionally nodding as he processed the information. "So, what symptoms are troubling you?" Eleanor took a deep breath and began. I've been feeling unwell for about 3 months. Dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and last week I collapsed at the pharmacy and was taken to the hospital. But what concerns me most is... She extended her left hand. The condition of this hand. Dr. Finch looked at her face over his glasses, then began carefully examining her left hand. The skin from her wrist to fingertips had an unnatural redness, with particular swelling at the base of her ring finger. When did the symptoms first appear? The doctor asked. About 3 months ago. At first I thought it was just a mild rash, but... Have there been any changes in your environment or products you're using? New detergents or cosmetics? Nothing comes to mind. Eleanor hesitated momentarily, then continued. Except, my husband gave me a new wedding ring for our anniversary around that time. Dr. Finch's eyes turned to the ring. This ring has a special blue gemstone embedded in it. Do you wear it all the time? Yes, since my husband had it specially made. I felt bad about taking it off. The doctor frowned and adjusted the examination light. Could you remove the ring so I can examine your hand more thoroughly? Eleanor was a bit reluctant but slowly removed the ring. A whitish line remained at the base of her finger, and the surrounding skin was clearly inflamed. Is there any pain? Sometimes there's a dull pain. Especially at night. Dr. Finch took out a special magnifying glass and examined Eleanor's hand in detail. Then he stood up and retrieved an oddly shaped device from a cabinet. It looked like a small detector. What is that? Eleanor asked. It's a special diagnostic tool. Dr. Finch avoided a technical explanation and picked up the ring. Let me check something. The doctor brought the device close to the ring. The device began to make a slight noise. Seeing this, Dr. Finch's expression changed completely. He conducted the test again, this time comparing it with his own wedding ring. The device did not react to his ring. Dr. Finch sat back down, removed his glasses, and rubbed his forehead. With a serious expression, he spoke. Miss Hartfield, may I keep this ring temporarily for testing? Is there a problem? Eleanor's heart began to race. The doctor paused slightly, choosing his words carefully. Eleanor, I previously specialized in radiology as well. He took a breath. This device is a radiation detector. And it's detecting traces of radiation from this ring. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Radiation. This blue stone is not an ordinary gemstone but may contain radioactive material. We need more precise testing to be sure. Eleanor was speechless. The doctor immediately produced a small lead container and carefully placed the ring inside. Then he contacted the laboratory to request emergency analysis. Please wait a moment. The test results will be available soon. Dr. Finch left the room. Left alone, Eleanor was overwhelmed by confusion and fear. Radioactive material. In the ring Marcus had given her. What did that mean? Her mind flashed back to her husband's strange behavior, his indifference to her hospitalization, and his abnormal opposition to her seeing a dermatologist. About 20 minutes later, Dr. Finch returned. His expression had grown even more severe. The test results are in, he said quietly. Unfortunately, my concerns were correct. This ring contains dangerous levels of radioactive material. It's particularly concentrated in the blue gemstone. Eleanor stared at the doctor in shock. But, why? This is a wedding ring. Marcus gave it to me. Dr. Finch stared intently at the container holding the ring, gradually hardening his expression. This metal has undergone special processing, the doctor said quietly. Not the kind of processing used for normal jewelry. He looked directly into Eleanor's eyes. Contact the police immediately. This is not an accident. Someone is deliberately trying to harm you. Those words sent a chill down her spine. but this was given to me by my husband. Eleanor's voice trembled, and her hands began to shake as well. All the symptoms of radiation exposure match, Dr. Finch explained in a professional tone. Dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and inflammation of the skin at the point of contact. These are all symptoms that can occur from long-term, low-level radiation exposure. Eleanor was at a loss for words, simply shaking her head. Eleanor, the doctor knelt before her and said with a serious expression, "You should report this to the police immediately. This amounts to attempted murder." The doctor's words echoed distantly in Eleanor's ears. Marcus trying to kill her. Her beloved husband. Her mind was filled with confusion. "Your symptoms would have certainly worsened if you had continued wearing this ring for a long period," Dr. Finch continued. "Without today's diagnosis, you would have suffered even more serious health consequences 6 months or a year from now." With tears clouding her eyes, Eleanor asked, Why would Marcus do such a thing?" Dr. Finch cautiously asked, "Were there any problems between you and your family or husband?" When Eleanor shook her head, the doctor continued, "Do you know much about your husband's background or past?" This question gave Eleanor pause. In fact, she knew surprisingly little about Marcus's past. She had never heard much about his family or his life before coming to Boston. Marcus had always avoided such topics, saying, "The future is more important than the past." "I can't believe he would hurt me," Eleanor said in a trembling voice. "I understand it's hard to believe," Dr. Finch's voice was tinged with sympathy. "But the scientific evidence is clear. This ring was designed to slowly poison you." The doctor placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "First, let's start emergency radiation exposure treatment. And we'll notify the police. You should also contact your parents." Eleanor nodded vaguely. Her world felt as though it had collapsed. Was her happy marriage to Marcus an illusion? Or was there some reason she didn't know about? "Why?" she murmured repeatedly. As Dr. Finch sealed the ring in a special container, he said quietly, "That will be revealed through police investigation. For now, your health and safety are the top priorities." The sunlight streaming through the window was still bright and warm, but the shadow that had fallen on Eleanor's heart was deep and cold. She took out her mobile phone and, with trembling fingers, dialed her parents' number. The meeting room at Boston Police Headquarters was filled with a heavy atmosphere. Eleanor was listening to the detective's report with her parents. The ring had been seized as evidence, and detailed analysis was being conducted by radiation medicine specialists. Ms. Hartfield, a man in his 40s who introduced himself as Detective Grayson, said while spreading out documents, "We executed search warrants for Marcus Shepard's home and workplace, but he was nowhere to be found. Credit card records indicate he's headed toward the Canadian border." "Did he really?" Eleanor's words faltered. "The evidence is conclusive," Detective Grayson said quietly. "The ring clearly contains dangerous amounts of radioactive material. This is no coincidence. It requires specialized knowledge and intent." George Hartfield clenched his fist. "I'll never forgive the man who did this to my daughter. State police and the FBI are cooperating to issue an APB," Detective Grayson continued. "We will apprehend him." Eleanor was stunned. It felt like she was in a nightmare. But why would Marcus? Martha squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. "Eli, how much did you really know about Marcus?" Those words brought Eleanor back to reality. Indeed, she knew very little about Marcus's past or family. He had always avoided talking about the past, saying, "The present and future are what matter." "From our investigation of his personal computer, we've discovered something interesting," a young female detective said, turning a screen toward them. "The name Marcus Shepard itself appears to be an alias. His real name is likely Michael Coldwell." "Coldwell?" George gasped. "Not from Coldwell Enterprise." "You know them?" Detective Grayson asked sharply. George exchanged glances with his wife and nodded slowly. Coldwell Enterprise had dealings with our company about 20 years ago. However, when we discovered they were conducting illegal drug research, we had to terminate the contract. Eleanor looked at her father in surprise. I've never heard that story. You were still a child then, Martha said quietly. Afterward, Coldwell Enterprise went bankrupt, and the owner, Robert Coldwell, committed suicide, Detective Grayson added, looking at the documents. And he had a son, Michael Coldwell, 14 years old at the time. And that Michael is Marcus. Eleanor's voice was trembling. We're confirming with DNA samples, but it's almost certain, the detective nodded. But why now after all this time? Eleanor was confused. Revenge, Detective Grayson said with a stern expression. He probably swore vengeance from childhood and meticulously planned it. Rather than attacking the Hartfield family directly, he targeted you, their daughter, to inflict maximum pain. He wanted my life. Eleanor was at a loss for words. The ring analysis results are in, a radiation specialist entered the room. The radioactive material used in this ring is not available on the normal market. It was likely procured on the black market. This was an extremely calculated crime. His goal was, George asked, to slowly kill Eleanor over time, the specialist explained calmly. This amount of radiation would certainly cause fatal health damage over a year to a year and a half. Moreover, it would be difficult to identify the cause through normal medical tests, making it appear like a natural death. The color drained from Eleanor's face. He never loved me, it was all for revenge. It wasn't love, he was using you as a tool, Martha stated firmly. Forget about this man. Eleanor gazed out the window. Rain had begun to fall, with raindrops streaming down the glass. Her heart was similarly wet with tears. We've distributed Coldwell's photo to all border checkpoints, Detective Grayson said. He won't get away. Several days later, Michael Coldwell was arrested near the Canadian border. Surprisingly, he offered little resistance, almost as if he had expected to be caught. In the interrogation room, he admitted everything. The Hartfield family ruined my life, his voice lacked emotion. Because of them, my father lost his honor and fortune and took his own life. I wanted them to feel the same pain. This happened 20 years ago, the detective said. Why now? Revenge takes time, Michael smiled coldly. I started by getting to know them. It didn't take long to realize that the Hartfield daughter was the weakest link. Independent, living somewhat apart from her family. You've been approaching her for 2 years, haven't you? I staged a chance meeting. I calculated everything so she would be attracted to me. There was absolutely no emotional fluctuation in his voice. Eleanor trembled uncontrollably watching the video of this testimony. Her married life, daily conversations, smiles, and all expressions of affection, everything had been a calculated performance. In court, Michael showed no remorse whatsoever, continuing to claim that sanctions against the Hartfield family were justified. The evidence was overwhelming, and he received a 20-year prison sentence for attempted murder, fraud, illegal acquisition of radioactive materials, and other charges. On the day the sentence was handed down, Eleanor summoned the courage to stand in court and face Michael. You tried to plant hatred while pretending to love, she said in a trembling voice, but with dignity. But you failed. I'm still here. And the family bonds you tried to destroy have only grown stronger. Michael remained expressionless, but for the first time, something appeared in his eyes. Regret, anger, or perhaps hatred that hadn't yet disappeared, Eleanor couldn't tell. As she left the courtroom, Eleanor felt as if the burden on her shoulders had lightened somewhat. Many challenges awaited her in the life ahead. Radiation treatment would continue. Healing psychological wounds would take time. But today marked a new beginning for her. Let's go home, Eleanor. George embraced his daughter's shoulders. Yes, Dad, Eleanor smiled faintly. Let's go home. As Boston's winter passed and spring sunlight began to embrace the city, Eleanor sat by the window in her parents' home, gazing at the flowers beginning to bloom in the garden. 6 months had passed since the trial, and her body was gradually recovering from the effects of radiation. Regular hospital visits and treatments continued, but according to Dr. Finch, her symptoms were improving better than expected. How are you feeling today? Martha asked her daughter while preparing breakfast. Better than yesterday, Eleanor smiled. It's slow, but I feel like I'm moving forward. Healing emotional wounds was more difficult than physical recovery. She was sometimes plagued by nightmares, but with the help of a professional therapist and family support, Eleanor was gradually rebuilding her life. One day, she found a small poster for a trauma survivor support group at the local hospital. The words, "Your experience might give someone else strength," resonated with her. Taking courage to participate in that group, Eleanor spoke about her experience to others for the first time, the pain of betrayal, fear, and the ongoing process of recovery. Your story will bring hope to many people, said Grace Mackenzie, the group leader. She was a 58-year-old former nurse and a survivor of domestic violence. If my experience can save someone's life, Eleanor said quietly, that might become my new purpose. From then on, she became involved as a volunteer in supporting victims of domestic violence and fraud. In particular, she began giving lectures based on her own experience about the hidden signs of violence and danger in intimate relationships. Through such activities, Eleanor met David Morrison, a medical law specialist. At 40, he held qualifications as both a doctor and a lawyer, specializing in medical malpractice and health damage litigation. Initially, he showed only professional interest in her case, but eventually, their relationship deepened. Breaking the cycle of revenge is difficult, David said during a dinner. But you're trying to accomplish that. I'm impressed by your courage. Eleanor showed a genuine smile for the first time. I was afraid to trust. But I can't move forward if I stay afraid. At the end of summer, Eleanor made a significant decision. She decided to visit the prison where Michael Coldwell was incarcerated. Her parents strongly objected, but Eleanor explained it was necessary to fully reclaim my life. In the prison infirmary, she confronted a weakened Michael. Ironically, he had developed terminal cancer from the effects of the radioactive materials he had handled. Why did you come? He asked weakly. I have something I want to tell you, Eleanor answered quietly. I cannot forgive what you did. But I won't let myself be bound by your hatred either. I'm moving forward. A few weeks after the visit, Michael died in prison. Eleanor received the news but no longer felt anger or hatred. There was only a quiet recognition that a dark chapter in her life had ended. As autumn deepened, Eleanor was watching the sunset in her parents' garden with David. A new chapter is beginning, she said quietly. Your strength will make that chapter wonderful, David replied. Eleanor's left hand no longer wore a ring. And she had no plans to wear a new one for quite some time. However, there was definitely a light of hope in her heart. Life goes on. And she would walk each step of it with her own strength.